All right, everyone, welcome back. Get ready, because today we are diving headfirst into a story that, well, it feels like it was ripped straight from the headlines of some kind of political thriller, you know? We're going to tackle this crazy intersection of law, politics, and the presidency. And oh boy, get ready for some surprises.
Yeah, this is definitely not your run-of-the-mill legal drama. What makes this so interesting is that we're looking at a president-elect who is actually facing sentencing for a felony conviction.
You got that right. We're focusing on the Donald Trump case. Recently convicted, right, on 34 felony counts, falsifying business records, all going back to something in 2016. And here's the picker. The sentence they're going for is unconditional discharge. That means no jail time, but that conviction, it's going on his permanent record.
Yeah, unconditional discharge, it's a specific term, legally speaking. Basically, he's guilty, but there's no extra punishment, just that conviction hanging over him.
So, like a slap on the wrist, but one that everyone can see and never goes away. And, well, as you can probably guess, Trump's legal team, they're not exactly happy campers, trying everything to delay sentencing, saying it'll mess with his, getting ready for the presidency and all.
And they've even tried to use, get this, a recent Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity to help their case.
Wait, hold on. Isn't that presidential immunity thing about stuff that happens while you're president? How are they trying to apply that to something that happened before he even stepped into the Oval Office?
You're totally right to be asking that. That Supreme Court ruling they're talking about, it has nothing to do with anything Trump did before becoming president. That ruling's all about official stuff a president does while they're actually in office, not things from way back when.
So are they just throwing stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks? Seems like a long shot to me.
Legally speaking, yeah, it's a stretch. But remember, we're not just in a courtroom here. This is politics, too. Lots of maneuvering going on.
So they're playing to a bigger audience than just the judge and jury.
Exactly. And the courts haven't been too happy about these delay tactics.
Yeah, our sources say the trial court has given them a few delays, because of the, let's just say, unusual circumstances. But they haven't given in entirely. Even the Supreme Court, as of this morning, they haven't gotten involved.
That's actually a pretty big deal. The Supreme Court, they usually are really strict about procedures, especially with state-level cases like this one. They almost always wait until all the other appeals are done before they step in.
It's kind of the opposite of what we see in death penalty cases, right? In those situations, they go over every little thing, every detail, making sure everything's been looked at before they give their opinion.
You got it. It's a pretty stark contrast, actually, and it makes you wonder if all the attention on this case, the fact that it's about a president-elect, is changing how things are going. Seems like we're in uncharted waters here.
Uncharted is right. So what does this all mean? What's the big picture here?
Well, looking at our sources, this whole situation could have a big impact on how the presidency and the courts work together, for years to come even.
It's like we're watching some high-stakes legal chess match, but the future of our democracy is on the line.
That's a good way to put it. It's not just that Trump's lawyers are trying to delay the sentencing, it's how they're going about it that's raising eyebrows. Going straight to the Supreme Court like this, before all the usual state appeals, that's not typical at all.
So they're trying to cut in line, skip the whole system.
Basically, yeah. And like we were saying before, it's so different from how the Supreme Court usually deals with death penalty cases. They're usually all about following every single rule, dotting every I, crossing every T. But here, it seems like they might bend the rules.
It makes you think. Maybe the power of the presidency, the fact that it's the president, is affecting the whole legal strategy here.
Definitely something to consider. It makes you worry, could this set a precedent for future cases with other presidents? Could this become like a playbook for delaying or even getting out of legal trouble?
That's a scary thought. It's like we're on a slippery slope here. And talking about precedents, our sources mentioned that Trump's appeal is based on a Supreme Court ruling from back in July 2024, something about presidential immunity.
Right, but that ruling, we already talked about it, it doesn't apply to Trump's situation at all. That was specifically about things a president does while they're in office, not stuff that happened before.
So it sounds like they're grasping at straws, trying to find some legal loophole to get him out of this.
It seems like it. And that brings us back to the big question, the rule of law. One article we read, it argues that even though Trump might not go to jail, the fact that he couldn't completely avoid sentencing is a win, even a small one, for the idea that everyone has to follow the law.
It's like a reminder that no one is above the law, not even the most powerful person in the country.
That's the ideal, the foundation of our whole system. But this case, it's really testing that ideal in a way we haven't seen before. It makes us ask, Are our institutions strong enough, tough enough to keep that rule of law going when something like this happens?
And it's not just about Trump. What happens in this case could have a ripple effect, changing how we see presidential power and holding presidents accountable. For generations to come, maybe?
Absolutely. If the lines get blurred between the president's office and the person who's president, people might start losing trust in the whole system.
It makes you ask, can justice really be blind when it comes to the president?
That's the question at the heart of what we're talking about today, and it's one we'll keep exploring as the story goes on. But before we move on, I'm curious to hear what you think. What do you think is the most important or worrying thing about all this?
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. We've gone from what seemed like a pretty straightforward sentencing to talking about the very core of our democracy, haven't we?
We have, and these aren't just, theoretical questions we're dealing with here. How this case turns out, it could actually set precedents, shaping how the presidency and the courts interact for years down the road.
Our sources seem to agree that this could be a defining moment in that relationship, like a real test for the whole system.
Exactly. And one of the big worries is, well, what happens to the rule of law? If we start seeing the presidency as a way to get around legal accountability, where does that leave us?
It's a tricky balance, right? We got to respect the office of the president, but also make sure that nobody, no matter how powerful, is above the law.
Finding that balance, that middle ground, that's key for a democracy to work. And remember, this is all happening against a backdrop of, some pretty intense political division, right? One of the articles we looked at even mentioned how Trump is using these legal fights to push his own political agenda, saying he's a victim of a system that's against him.
Sounds familiar. We've seen that tactic a lot lately, haven't we? Turning legal challenges into political weapons, trying to get points and rally people to their side.
Yeah, it's true. And it's worrying because it starts to make the whole legal system seem political, which is not good. The courts should be impartial, just calling balls and strikes, not getting caught up in all the partisan fighting.
Exactly. If we lose sight of that, if the courts become just another political battlefield, we're in big trouble. People start losing trust in one of the most important parts of our democracy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Losing that trust, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, it's a dangerous road to go down. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave you, the listener? What are the long-term consequences here?
That's the big question, isn't it? After all this, you might be wondering, what does this mean for the future? What happens next?
Well, it's hard to predict the future, right? But one thing is clear. This case shows a much bigger struggle going on, a struggle over who has the power in our government. And the outcome, it could ripple outwards, going way beyond just this one case. It could change how we see the rule of law, even the future of democracy in America.
It's a reminder, a wake-up call, really, that our democracy is a delicate thing. It's a work in progress that needs all of us to be paying attention, all of us to be involved. It's up to every one of us to be informed, to be engaged, and to be committed to those basic principles that this country was built on.
Perfectly said. This deep dive, it's taken us on quite a journey, hasn't it? From what seemed like a simple sentencing to a much bigger discussion about the presidency, the courts, and the very fabric of our nation.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about, a lot to wrestle with. As you go about your day, here's something to ponder. What can we do? What safeguards can we put in place to stop future presidents from maybe abusing their power to avoid being held accountable by the law? What can we, as everyday citizens, do to make sure that the law applies equally to everyone, no matter how powerful they are?
Those are some really important questions to think about, and we hope you keep exploring them, keep talking about them. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.